the workers to do at nighttime. So some of the women that we've worked with have been working over 20 hours a day and have been held against their will, physically, psychologically, and sexually abused by their employers. More?
How you got them into SAN?
Let's see.
What were the reasons you had to refer them to SAN? The language?
Without the South Asian Network, we would not have been able to provide the services that we have been able to provide to these women, primarily because of language and culture issues. And SAN has also acted as a really important cultural broker about issues that these women face. Without SAN being available to help us, the women that we have been able to help would not have been able to participate in the criminal prosecution of their employers. They would not have been able to access services out in the community, and they would not have been able to begin to rebuild their lives as free and independent people in the United States. I think the trend of slavery and trafficking in the South Asian community is something that's finally been acknowledged. The trend of trafficking and slavery in the South Asian community is something that's finally being acknowledged, and something that the community does need to deal with. And I think SAN has been a real leader in Southern California in beginning to address these issues straight on. One of the cases that we first worked on together, SAN responded immediately. And because this is such a new issue, I think many agencies are hesitant to deal with it. It's complicated, and it's something that can be embarrassing to the community. But SAN jumped right in with us and has been a really strong partner, and I'm sure we'll be working together in the future, unfortunately, on a growing problem. But fortunately, the partnership that we have created right now is something we should be able to build on, and hopefully we'll be able to provide better services and more services to this growing special needs group.
Do you have any statistics like what's happening?
The Central Intelligence Agency estimated in 1999 that 50,000 women and children are brought to the United States every year for forced labor. So that's people that are working in restaurants, private homes, sweatshops, sewing clothes, assembling toys in factories, and even in agriculture. We also know that men are trafficked to the United States in these various industries, so the number is probably much higher. Globally, there are an estimated 27 million people in slavery at any given time. And as globalization is growing, as free trade that isn't fair trade is growing, I think these problems are going to continue to increase. The wealth between nations and within nations is growing. There's a bigger gap in wealth between and within nations, and women are increasingly being forced to migrate around the world to support families. So with the lack of access to jobs and education in their home countries, unfortunately, women are going to be forced to rely on the false promises of traffickers who are promising them good jobs in the West, which turn out to be conditions of slavery instead.
Can you give us an example of a case where either you work with SAN, a little bit of...
I can't talk really too much about anything right now. It's confidentiality issues.
Like an example type.
Particularly in the South Asian community, I think we have seen and we're going to see more cases of domestic worker abuse being referred to us, either through the authorities or through the community. I also think that there's a condition called servile marriage, and that involves women being brought to the United States through marriage. And what happens when they get here is that it actually turns out to be a situation of slavery. So the woman was, she entered into the marriage. She entered. What do I want to say? She entered the marriage. She entered into the marriage in good faith, but when she arrived in the United States, her documentation is kept from her. She's treated as a slave, and she's not treated really as a wife, and the husband may be trying to make some kind of get some kind of economic benefit off of her, and this was not at all what she expected. She was deceived about how she would be treated, and once she got here was not treated like a wife but really like a servant. These types of cases, I think we're going to see more and more of them, but they are difficult to prove as a case of involuntary servitude. But I think as we do more education in the community, these are the kinds of things we're going to see more of. Primarily, we've worked with SAN on cases of domestic worker abuse that have involved exploitation of women who've been held against their will, some for as long as 5 years, in extreme situations of physical, psychological, and sexual abuse. I can't really talk much about them because it's just I don't want, it's just such a small community.
Yeah,
I don't want to.
No, that's okay. Once
To understand about the problem of slavery is how culture and caste and class play such a strong role in creating the conditions in which trafficking and slavery can occur. Working together as a coalition and as a multi-ethnic coalition on these issues is the only way to go about it, and cooperation is a core value of our organization, and we couldn't do our work without SAN. Get a new case referred to us, usually from the government. The most important thing is to find interpretation as soon as possible, and it's very key that SAN works with us right from the beginning. Initially, we need to interview the victim and determine whether or not they're a victim of slavery and if we can work with them. And from there, we try to find shelter, which is also problematic because there is no South Asian shelter in Los Angeles. And then we work together to co-case manage the client, who then participates in the criminal prosecution of their employer or the people that brought them here. And that process can take, it takes minimum 1 year, but it can take often more than a year. And SAN is really key in helping the client to understand the criminal justice process. And we work together to make sure that the client gets medical services, mental health services, to get that client to the U.S. Attorney's Office for their interviews, to get that client to the INS to get a work permit. It's really important to have a group like SAN with us every step of the way so that the client understands what's happening and so that the client feels connected to their own community. And that could be through religion, through culture, or through other avenues of creating community support. So it's really a co-case management type process, and that's the best way to do it. And we've really had success, and we really feel that that's the only way to work together. So it's very time-consuming and intense and emotionally trying for everyone working on the case, but it's the best for the client, and it's very victim-centered. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, that's very good.
What do we say are some of the most critical things? Token.
and I think just reiterating that
I would say, by the same token, almost reintroducing the client to their own culture, because they may have been isolated from their own culture and from their religion for many years. They may have been, denied going to the temple, or, denied prayer within their slavery situation. And they may also have had South Asian employers for instance, a woman who's from an ethnic minority in India or another part of South Asia who may have had Indian employers, she does not trust the Indian community. And reintroducing them to people and getting them to trust that community again is a really important step in rebuilding that victim's life. Also, because SAN and its board and volunteers represent such a diverse community, they're a really great source for language capabilities, and for information about culture and how different groups of people interact with each other. So I think that's one of the great strengths of SAN is its diversity. We are going to continue to get clients from places that are far away, and where the language finding an interpreter for that language is extremely difficult. So it's definitely a strength that SAN has such a diverse membership,